A Korean mafia boss collapsed, and a black woman did what his girlfriend wouldn't. When a powerful Korean mafia boss suddenly collapsed, the one person who stepped in to save him wasn't his girlfriend. It was a black woman named Sarah. She didn't just save his life, she helped rebuild it. She supported him, believed in his vision, and invested heavily in his business. But at her very first dinner with his family, instead of gratitude, she was met with cruelty. They mocked her. They insulted her. They abused her, all because of the color of her skin. What they didn't know, she was the investor they had been desperately waiting for. The woman they humiliated owned 70% of their company. What happened next left them speechless. This is Sarah's story, and you definitely don't want to miss it. Before we continue, please subscribe to our channel and let us know where you're watching from. Don't forget to like the video and leave a comment. One moment he was standing. The next, the cold marble floor rushed up to meet him. Damien's body hit the ground with a sickening thud that silenced the entire lobby. His eyes rolled back, chest barely rising. Una screamed, but her feet stayed planted exactly where they were, her phone clattering from her manicured fingers. The bodyguards froze. These men, trained to kill without hesitation, capable of breaking bones with their bare hands, stood paralyzed as their boss lay dying on the polished marble. Their expensive suits suddenly looked like costumes. Their practiced intimidation meant nothing. "Do something," Una shrieked, her voice climbing higher with each word. But even as she screamed, her feet stayed rooted to the spot. Her face had gone pale beneath her perfect makeup, mascara beginning to streak. She looked at Damien like he was already a corpse, something dangerous and untouchable. The crowd grew. Phones came out. People whispered. No one moved closer. "Someone call an ambulance," a businessman shouted from the safety of the crowd. "I already did," another voice responded. They said 10 minutes. 10 minutes. Damien didn't have 10 minutes. Outside, Sarah Matthews had just pulled her black Mercedes to a stop at the red light near the Hansum Corporation building. She was reviewing a contract on her tablet, her coffee balanced perfectly in the cup holder, when movement caught her eye through the building's floor-to-ceiling glass walls. A crowd. Growing rapidly. That particular kind of chaos that meant something was very wrong. Sarah's instincts kicked in before her mind fully processed what she was seeing. She put the car in park right there in the middle of the street, grabbed her bag, and ran. Behind her, horns blared. Someone shouted. She didn't care. Her heels clicked rapidly against the pavement as she pushed through the revolving doors. The crowd parted slightly when she approached, perhaps sensing the authority in her stride, and she got her first clear view. A man on the floor. Early 30s. Expensive charcoal suit. Deathly pale. Chest barely moving. Sarah's medical training from her years volunteering at Johns Hopkins kicked in immediately. She dropped to her knees beside him without hesitation, her skirt spreading across the marble. "Move back," she said firmly, not looking at anyone in particular. One of the bodyguards stepped forward, his hand moving instinctively toward her shoulder. "Ma'am, you can't." Sarah's head snapped up, her dark eyes meeting his with such intensity that his hand stopped midair. "Unless you want to watch him die, I suggest you step back. Now." Something in her voice made him obey. She pressed 2 fingers against Damien's carotid artery. Pulse present, but weak, thready. His breathing was shallow, irregular. His skin was cold and clammy. This wasn't just exhaustion or stress. This was a body in crisis shutting down. "How long has he been unconscious?" Sarah asked, her hands already checking his airway. 3 minutes, someone called from the crowd. Maybe 4. Too long. Way too long for how weak his pulse felt. Sarah looked up at the sea of faces. At the girlfriend frozen in her designer heels, still standing in the same spot, tears streaming down her face but making no move to help. At the bodyguards who looked lost without orders. At the gathering crowd filming everything on their phones. Someone tell me an ambulance is coming, Sarah said, her voice cutting through the murmurs. 10 minutes out, a security guard offered weakly. Maybe less. Sarah's jaw tightened. She looked down at Damien's ashen face, watched his chest struggle to rise and fall, and made her decision. He doesn't have 10 minutes. In one fluid motion, Sarah stood and repositioned herself. She slid one arm under Damien's shoulders, the other beneath his knees, and with a strength that made several people gasp out loud, she lifted all 185 pounds of him straight off the ground. The lobby went completely silent. Sarah held Damien against her chest like he weighed nothing, her muscles barely straining. Years of private training and discipline paid off in this single moment. His head lolled against her shoulder, and she adjusted her grip to keep his airway open. Which car is his? Sarah demanded, looking directly at the nearest bodyguard. The man stood frozen, mouth slightly open. Which car? Each word was a command. He finally pointed toward the entrance with a shaking hand. The black Maybach. Keys are with. Get them. Now. The bodyguard scrambled to comply, pulling keys from another guard's pocket. Sarah was already moving toward the exit, carrying Damien with purposeful strides. The crowd parted like water before her. Una finally found her voice. Wait, where are you taking him? You can't just. Sarah didn't even slow down. Someone who actually cares about whether he lives or dies should probably come along. The words hit like a slap. Una's face crumpled, but she still didn't move. Just stood there crying as Sarah pushed through the revolving doors. Outside, the bodyguard had already opened the Maybach's back door. Sarah carefully laid Damien across the leather seats, positioning his head to keep his airway clear. She grabbed a jacket someone had draped over the headrest and placed it under his head. Get in, she told the bodyguard. Monitor his breathing. If it stops, you call out immediately. But who's driving? Sarah was already sliding into the driver's seat. She adjusted the mirrors with quick, efficient movements, started the engine, and pulled into traffic before anyone could protest further. The bodyguard in the back seat stared at her in shock. Who are you? Someone who knows the nearest hospital with a cardiac unit is 4 minutes away if I don't hit traffic, Sarah replied, her eyes focused on the road as she accelerated smoothly through an intersection. Now watch him. Call out any changes. Her hands were steady on the wheel. Her mind was clear, calculating routes and timing. But somewhere in her chest, her heart was pounding. She didn't know this man. Didn't know his name, or why he'd collapsed, or why his girlfriend had frozen instead of helping. But she knew what it looked like when someone was dying. And she wasn't going to let that happen. The Maybach moved through Seoul's streets like a shadow, Sarah's driving precise and controlled despite the urgency hammering in her chest. She wove through traffic with the kind of confidence that came from years of navigating busy cities, her eyes constantly flicking to the rearview mirror to check on Damien. His breathing's getting worse, the bodyguard said, his voice tight with panic. It's really shallow. Keep talking to him, Sarah instructed, taking a sharp turn that made the tires squeal slightly. Say anything. His brain needs to hear voices. Boss, the bodyguard said, leaning closer to Damien. Boss, stay with us. We're almost there. Sarah's jaw clenched. 2 more minutes. The hospital's sign appeared in the distance, and she accelerated, running a yellow light that was already turning red. What's his name? Sarah asked. Damien. Damien Park. Damien, Sarah repeated, her voice firm as she pulled into the hospital's emergency entrance. Hang on. She barely had the car in park before she was out, yanking open the back door. The bodyguard scrambled out of the way as Sarah lifted Damien again, this time moving faster toward the sliding glass doors. I need help, she shouted the moment she was inside. Male, early 30s, collapsed, weak pulse, shallow breathing. 2 nurses appeared with a gurney, but Sarah was already laying Damien down on it herself, rattling off vital signs like She'd been taking them the whole drive. Pulses thready, breathing labored, skin cold and clammy, unconscious for approximately 8 minutes. A doctor arrived, immediately taking charge. When did he collapse? 8 minutes ago. Marble floor had impact possible but minimal. The doctor's eyes snapped to Sarah's face, recognizing the clinical precision in her words. Medical background? Volunteer experience. But doctor, I think this is severe exhaustion, possibly dehydration or… We've got him now. The doctor's team was already wheeling Damien toward the emergency bay. You did good work getting him here this fast. Sarah stood in the middle of the emergency room, suddenly very aware of how fast her heart was beating. The bodyguard appeared beside her, looking lost. Thank you, he managed. I don't, we should have. Call his family, Sarah said quietly. They need to know. The bodyguard nodded and pulled out his phone with shaking hands. Sarah should have left then. Should have gotten back in that expensive car and driven to her office for the meeting she was now extremely late for. Should have walked away from this stranger whose life she'd just saved. Instead, she found herself walking to the waiting area and sitting down. Just for a few minutes, she told herself. Just to make sure he was stable. 20 minutes passed. Then 40. The bodyguard made call after call, his voice low and urgent. Other guards arrived, filling the waiting room with their dark suits and tense faces. They looked at Sarah with a mixture of confusion and gratitude, unsure what to make of this black woman who'd done what none of them could. An hour in, the emergency room doors burst open. Yuna arrived like a storm, her designer dress wrinkled, her makeup completely ruined. She was flanked by 2 women who looked like they'd come straight from a spa day, their faces masks of concern that didn't quite reach their eyes. Where is he? Yuna demanded of the nearest bodyguard. Is he alive? Oh God, is he? He's stable, the guard replied. They're running tests. Yuna's gaze swept the waiting room and landed on Sarah. Her eyes narrowed, red-rimmed and hostile. You, she said, her voice shaking. You took him. You just took him. Sarah stood slowly, meeting Yuna's gaze with calm directness. He was dying. Someone had to do something. You had no right. You don't even know him. Yuna's voice climbed higher. You could have heard him moving him like that, driving like a crazy person. I saved his life. Sarah's voice was quiet, but it cut through Yuna's hysteria like a blade. Which is more than you did. The waiting room went silent. Yuna's face flushed deep red. How dare you? You stood there, Sarah continued, her tone still even but her words devastating. You stood there screaming while he died on the floor. His bodyguard stood there. Everyone stood there. So yes, I took him. Because in that moment, I was the only person in that entire lobby who cared more about his life than about looking helpless. One of Yuna's friends grabbed her arm. Yuna, don't. But Yuna jerked away, her hands balling into fists. You don't understand. I was in shock. I was terrified. You can't judge me for… I'm not judging you, Sarah said, and she meant it. I'm just stating facts. Ms. Matthews. Everyone turned. A doctor stood in the doorway, clipboard in hand, looking directly at Sarah. Yes, Sarah responded, stepping forward. Mr. Park is awake. He's asking for you. The shock on Yuna's face would have been comical in any other situation. Her mouth opened and closed without sound. He's asking for her? Yuna finally managed. The doctor nodded, professional and unbothered by the drama. He was quite insistent. Says he wants to thank the woman who saved him. Sarah felt every eye in the room on her. She could feel Yuna's fury like heat, could sense the bodyguard's confusion, could practically hear the gossip already forming. Of course, Sarah said simply. Lead the way. As she followed the doctor down the hallway, she heard Yuna's voice rising behind her, shrill with indignation. This is insane. I'm his girlfriend. I should be. The door closed, cutting off the rest. The doctor glanced at Sarah with something that might have been amusement. Fair warning, he's on some pretty strong medications. He might be a bit emotional. Understood. They stopped at a private room. Through the small window, Sarah could see Damien propped up in bed, for lines running into his arm, monitors beeping steadily beside him. Even pale and exhausted, there was something striking about him. The doctor knocked once and pushed the door open. Damien's eyes found Sarah immediately, and everything stopped. Later, Sarah would struggle to explain what happened in that moment. It wasn't just attraction, though she felt that too, a pull low in her stomach that took her completely by surprise. It wasn't just gratitude in his gaze, though that was there as well. It was recognition. Like something in him saw something in her, and vice versa, and the connection snapped into place with almost physical force. "Hi," Damien said, his voice rough from the intubation they'd clearly done and removed. "I'm told I owe you my life." Sarah stepped into the room, very aware of how her heart rate had picked up. "You don't owe me anything. I'm just glad you're okay. The doctor said you carried me out. Drove me here yourself." Someone had to. A ghost of a smile touched his lips.
"Yeah.
Someone did." He paused, his dark eyes never leaving her face. "What's your name?"
Sarah.
"Sarah Matthews." Damien Park. He tried to extend his hand, then winced at the four.
Saw the...
"Not exactly at my best right now." "You collapsed from exhaustion," Sarah said, moving closer without thinking about it. "The doctor said you'd been awake for 7 days straight." Damien's expression shifted, something guarded sliding into place. "Work has been demanding. Demanding enough to kill you, apparently." The bluntness made him blink, then laugh, a short, surprised sound. "You don't pull punches. Life's too short." Clearly. His gaze intensified. "Sarah Matthews. Should I know that name?" "No reason you would." He was studying her now, really looking. "You have medical training?"
Some.
"Volunteer work, mostly." "Years ago." "You were very calm. Very competent." He paused. "Very strong." A slight smile touched Sarah's lips. "I work out." Clearly, he echoed her own word back, and there was something in his tone that made heat crawl up her neck. The door burst open. Una stormed in like she owned the place, her friends trailing behind her. She'd fixed her makeup somehow, but her eyes were still red and wild. "Damien." She rushed to the opposite side of the bed, reaching for his hand. "Oh my God, I was so worried." Damien's gaze shifted to Una, and Sarah watched something cool slide over his expression. It was like watching a mask descend. Una. Just her name. Nothing else. But the tone said volumes. Una didn't seem to notice. She was crying again, clutching his hand. "It was so horrible, baby. You just fell, and I didn't know what to do. I was so scared. I thought you were going to die right there, and..." "You didn't come with me," Damien said quietly. Una froze. "What?" "To the hospital." "You didn't come with me." I was in shock. Una's voice went defensive. "I couldn't think straight. I was terrified. You can't blame me for..." "I'm not blaming you." Damien's voice was flat, emotionless. "I'm just stating a fact. You didn't come." "But she did." Una spun toward Sarah, her finger jabbing accusingly through the air. "This stranger, who doesn't even know you, just grabbed you and took you, and I had no idea where you were, or if you were even alive." "She saved my life," Damien interrupted. "She had no right." "She saved my life," Damien repeated, louder this time. "When everyone else, including you, stood there doing nothing, she saved my life." The room fell silent except for the steady beep of the heart monitor. Sarah shifted uncomfortably. "I should go. You need rest, and this seems like a private conversation." "Don't." Damien's word came out sharp, almost desperate. His eyes found Sarah's.
"Please. Stay."
Just for a minute." Something in his gaze held her in place. Sarah nodded slowly. Yuna's face contorted with fury. Are you serious right now? You're asking her to stay? I'm your girlfriend, Damien.
Me.
Not some random woman who did what you couldn't, Damien finished. His voice wasn't cruel, but it was final. Or wouldn't. I'm not sure which is worse. Yuna recoiled like she'd been slapped. You're not thinking straight. You're on medication, you're confused. I'm thinking very clearly. Damien's hand slipped out of Yuna's grip. Probably more clearly than I have in months. Damien. We're done, Yuna. The words dropped into the room like stones into still water. Yuna's mouth fell open. What? We're done. This relationship. It's over. You can't break up with me in a hospital room. Yuna's voice climbed toward hysteria. You almost died. You're not thinking straight. You don't mean this. I've never meant anything more. Damien's gaze shifted to Sarah for just a moment before returning to Yuna. I almost died today. And in that moment, watching you stand there, I realized something. You love the idea of me. The status. The money. The power. But you don't love me. That's not true. Tears streamed down Yuna's face. I love you. I've always loved you. If you loved me, you would have moved. You would have done something. Anything. Damien's voice softened slightly, but his resolve didn't waver. A complete stranger cared more about whether I lived or died than you did. That tells me everything I need to know. Yuna's friends finally stepped forward, each grabbing one of her arms. Come on, one of them whispered. Let's go.
No.
Yuna struggled against them. Damien, please, you can't do this, not like this. I'm sorry, Damien said, and he actually sounded like he meant it. But yes, I can. The friends managed to drag Yuna toward the door. She was sobbing now, mascara streaming down her face again, her designer dress wrinkled and disheveled. At the doorway, she turned back one last time. You'll regret this, she spat, her eyes blazing with hurt and rage. When you're thinking clearly, you'll realize what a mistake this is. Then she was gone, the door slamming behind her. The silence that followed was deafening. Sarah stood frozen, her mind reeling. I should not have been here for that. Probably not, Damien agreed. He sounded exhausted. But I'm glad you were.
Why?
Because it needed to happen. And if you hadn't been here, I might have convinced myself I was being irrational, that the medication was making me emotional. He met her eyes. But I'm not. This has been coming for a long time. Today just made it impossible to ignore. Sarah moved toward the door.
You still need to rest.
This has been a lot for one day. Wait. Damien's hand reached out, not quite touching her, but close enough that she felt the intention. I need to properly thank you for saving me. You don't need to. Yes, I do. Please. Something vulnerable flickered across his face. I have a family dinner next week. My grandmother's been pestering me about it for months. Bringing someone important. Meeting the family. The whole traditional thing. Sarah's eyebrow rose. You just broke up with your girlfriend 5 minutes ago, and you're already. Not like that, Damien said quickly. I mean, I'd like you to come, as my guest, so I can thank you properly. So my family can thank you. I don't think that's a good idea. Why not? Sarah gestured vaguely at the door. Because your ex-girlfriend just left here thinking I'm the reason you broke up with her. Because this whole situation is complicated. Because you feel it too, Damien said quietly. Sarah's breath caught. Feel what? This. Damien's eyes held hers with an intensity that made her skin tingle. Whatever this is. This connection. Tell me I'm crazy. Tell me it's the medication talking. Tell me you don't feel it. Sarah should have lied.
Should have walked out right then.
Should have maintained professional distance and never looked back. Instead, she heard herself say, I can't tell you that. The smile that spread across Damien's face was slow and genuine and absolutely devastating. Then come to dinner, he said. One evening. Let me say thank you properly. After that, if you never want to see me again, I'll respect that. But give me one chance. Sarah's mind screamed at her to say no. This was insane. She'd just met this man. He was clearly involved in things she didn't understand. His ex-girlfriend already hated her. This was a disaster waiting to happen. But when she opened her mouth, she said, "One dinner." Damien's smile widened. One dinner. But for the record, Sarah added, this is a terrible idea. The best ones usually are. Sarah left the hospital in a daze, her mind spinning. She retrieved her Mercedes from the towing lot, because of course it had been towed, and finally made it to her office 3 hours late. Her assistant, Jennifer, took one look at her and immediately brought coffee. Rough morning, Jennifer asked carefully. You have no idea. Sarah spent the rest of the day trying to focus on work and failing spectacularly. Her mind kept drifting back to that hospital room, to the way Damien had looked at her, to the electricity that had sparked between them when their eyes met. It was ridiculous. She was a businesswoman, rational and practical. She didn't believe in instant connections or love at first sight or whatever romance novels called this feeling, currently making her stomach flip every time she remembered his voice. And yet, that evening, alone in her penthouse apartment overlooking the Han River, Sarah found herself researching Damien Park. What she found made her coffee go cold in her hand. Park Industries, real estate development, import-export businesses, nightclubs, all legitimate on the surface, but the deeper she dug, the more the picture became clear. The rumors, the whispers, the connections to souls underground. Damien Park wasn't just a businessman. He was exactly what she'd suspected the moment she'd seen those bodyguards freeze in the lobby. Korean Mafia. A boss, from the looks of it. Sarah should have been running in the opposite direction. Should have blocked his number, which he'd somehow gotten into her phone before she left the hospital. Should have forgotten the entire day ever happened. Instead, she kept digging. 2 hours later, she'd pieced together the real story. Park Industries was drowning. Debt hidden behind shell corporations and creative accounting. The kind of debt that explained why a man would go 7 days without sleep. The kind of debt that could get people killed. Sarah sat back in her chair, her mind working through possibilities. She'd made her fortune in strategic investments, in seeing potential where others saw risk. Her portfolio was worth hundreds of millions, carefully cultivated over years of brilliant decisions and calculated risks. This was different. This was personal. She pulled up her investment account and stared at the numbers. Then she started making calls. By midnight, Sarah had routed $80 million through 3 different investment firms, each purchasing strategic shares in Park Industries and its associated companies. By dawn, she'd acquired another $40 million in assets. By the time the Seoul Stock Exchange opened Monday morning, she owned 72% of Park Industries. And no one knew it was her. The purchases were buried under corporate entities and international holdings. Untraceable. Exactly how she'd wanted it. Sarah stood at her floor-to-ceiling windows, watching the sun rise over Seoul, and wondered if she'd just made the smartest or stupidest decision of her life. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number that she somehow knew was Damien. Dinner is Friday at 7. My driver will pick you up. Thank you again for everything. Sarah stared at the message for a long moment before typing back. I can drive myself. Send me the address. His response came immediately. Independent. I like that. But my grandmother would kill me if I didn't send a car. It's tradition. Despite herself, Sarah smiled.
Fine.
But I'm warning you now, I don't do well with expectations.
Good.
Neither do I. The week crawled by. Sarah threw herself into work, managing her various investments and holdings. She watched from behind her anonymous corporate veil as Park Industries stock began to stabilize. as creditors suddenly became less aggressive, as the company that had been on the verge of collapse started to breathe again. She also watched news of Damien's breakup with Una spread through Seoul's social circles like wildfire. The gossip sites were brutal, speculating about the mysterious woman at the hospital. Una gave several tearful interviews about betrayal and heartbreak, carefully painting herself as the victim. Sarah ignored it all. She had bigger concerns, like the fact that she couldn't stop thinking about a man she'd known for approximately 2 hours. Friday arrived faster than she expected. Sarah stood in front of her closet, suddenly unsure. What did one wear to meet a mafia boss's family? She settled on a sleek BL8 dress, elegant but not overdone, professional but not cold. She left her hair natural, her makeup minimal. At exactly 7, the doorman called up. "Ms. Matthews, your car is here." Sarah grabbed her purse and headed down. The car was a black Mercedes S-Class, and the driver who opened her door was one of the bodyguards from the hospital. "Ms. Matthews," he greeted, his tone respectful. "I'm Min-jun. Mr. Park asked me to drive you this evening." "Thank you, Min-jun." The drive took them out of the city center and into the hills where Seoul's old money lived. The houses grew larger, the gates more imposing. Finally, they pulled up to a sprawling estate that looked like it had been standing for generations. Sarah's stomach fluttered with nerves she hadn't felt in years. Min-jun opened her door and gestured toward the entrance. "Mr. Park is waiting inside." The front door opened before she reached it. Damien stood in the doorway, and Sarah's breath caught. He'd recovered well. The color was back in his face, though there were still shadows under his eyes. He wore a perfectly tailored dark suit that probably cost more than most people's cars. But it was his expression that stopped her. Open, genuine pleasure at seeing her. "Sarah," he said, and the way he said her name made something warm unfurl in her chest. "You look beautiful." "You look alive," she replied. "That's an improvement." He laughed, that same surprised sound from the hospital.
Come in.
"Fair warning, my family is a lot. I can handle a lot. I'm counting on it." Damien offered his arm, and after a moment's hesitation, Sarah took it. The moment their hands touched, that electricity was back. Stronger this time. Damien felt it too. She saw it in the slight widening of his eyes, the sharp intake of breath. "Still feel it?" she asked quietly. "More than before," he admitted. "You? Unfortunately." "Why unfortunately?" "Because this is complicated, Damien. You know it is. The best things usually are." He led her inside, and Sarah found herself in a massive foyer with marble floors and a chandelier that probably cost more than her car. "My family is waiting in the dining room. Before we go in, I need to warn you."
Damien.
"Is that her?" An elderly woman appeared at the top of the grand staircase, moving with surprising speed for someone who had to be in her 80s. She wore traditional hanbok in deep burgundy, her silver hair pulled back elegantly. "Grandmother," Damien said, a mixture of affection and exasperation in his voice. "You must be the woman who saved my grandson's life." The grandmother descended the stairs with regal bearing, her sharp eyes taking in every detail of Sarah's appearance. "I am Park Minesio." Sarah bowed respectfully. "Sarah Matthews. It's an honor to meet you." "American," Minesio observed. "And you speak Korean."
Ido.
"I've lived in Seoul for 5 years." Minesio circled Sarah like a general inspecting troops. "And you're the one who carried my foolish grandson out of that building when his expensive bodyguards stood there like statues." "I did what anyone should have done. But no one else did. Only you." Minesio stopped directly in front of Sarah, and for a moment, her expression was unreadable. Then she smiled, warm and genuine. "Thank you for saving him. He's stubborn and reckless, but he's precious to me." "Grandmother," Damien started.
Hush.
"I'm talking to Sarah." Minesio linked her arm through Sarah's, completely ignoring her grandson.
Come.
Let me introduce you to the rest of the family. They're dying to meet the woman who's already got everyone talking. As Minaso led her toward the dining room, Sarah caught Damien's eye over her shoulder. He looked amused and slightly concerned. She was beginning to understand why. The dining room was enormous, dominated by a table that could easily seat 20. Currently, it seated about 12, all of whom turned to stare when Sarah entered. Damien's mother sat at the head of the table, her expression cold and assessing. Next to her, a woman who could only be Damien's sister whispered something to the man beside her, her eyes never leaving Sarah. Various aunts, uncles, and cousins filled the other seats. The temperature in the room dropped about 10 degrees. Everyone, Minacio announced proudly, this is Sarah Matthews, the woman who saved Damien's life. Sarah, this is my daughter-in-law, Park Sujin. She gestured to Damien's mother. My granddaughter, Jiwoo, and various other family members whose names you'll forget immediately. Polite laughter rippled through the room, but it was forced. Damien pulled out a chair for Sarah, positioning himself between her and his mother. As Sarah sat, she felt every eye in the room on her. So, Sujin said, her voice sweet as poisoned honey, you're the one who caused all that drama at the hospital. We heard Yuna was quite upset. Mother, Damien's voice carried a warning. I'm just making conversation, darling. Sujin's smile didn't reach her eyes. After all, it's not every day that a complete stranger inserts herself into our family's private matters.
Shara met Sojin's gaze calmly.
I inserted myself into keeping your son alive. Everything else was coincidental. Jiwoo leaned forward, her expression sharp. How convenient that you happen to be there. That you happen to know exactly what to do. That you happen to catch my brother's attention so thoroughly that he broke up with his girlfriend of 2 years. Jiwoo, Damien said sharply.
What?
I'm just saying what everyone's thinking. Jiwoo's perfectly manicured hand waved dismissively. It all seems very calculated. The implication hung in the air like smoke. Sarah felt anger spark in her chest, but before she could respond, Minacio's chopstick slammed against her plate with enough force to make everyone jump. That's enough, the old woman said, her voice cutting through the tension like a blade. Sarah is our guest. She saved Damien's life when the rest of Seoul stood around taking pictures. You will treat her with respect. We're just being cautious, grandmother, Jiwoo protested. We don't know anything about her. Where she's from, what she does, why she's really here. I'm here because your brother invited me, Sarah interrupted quietly. And if you'd like to know about me, you could try asking instead of making accusations. Jiwoo's eyes flashed.
Fine.
What do you do, Sarah Matthews? I'm an investor. How vague. What kind of investor? The successful kind. A few of the cousins snickered. Jiwoo's face flushed with anger. Do you have family in Seoul? Sujin asked, her tone still sweet and cutting.
No.
I moved here for business. What kind of business requires a woman to move to a foreign country alone? The question was barbed with judgment. Sarah's jaw tightened. The kind that requires intelligence and independence. 2 things I value highly. How modern, Sujin said, making it sound like an insult. And your family back home? Surely they must worry about you being so far away in such a different culture. The implication was clear. You don't belong here. My family trusts my judgment, Sarah replied evenly. They raised me to be strong and self-sufficient. Clearly. Jiwoo's eyes raked over Sarah's dress, her hair, her skin. Though I imagine it must be difficult, being so different here. Sarah felt Damien tense beside her, his hand moving toward hers under the table. But she didn't need him to fight this battle. Different isn't difficult, Sarah said, her voice calm but her eyes hard as steel. Different is just different. And I've never been intimidated by people who can't see past their own narrow perspectives. The table went silent. Minacio began to laugh, a delighted sound that echoed through the dining room. Oh, I like her.
She has spine.
Unlike that weeping willow Damien was wasting his time with. Grandmother, Jiwoo looked scandalized.
What?
It's true. That Yuna girl was all looks and no substance. Stood there crying while her boyfriend died. Pathetic. Minacio turned to Sarah with approval in her eyes. You, on the other hand, did something. That matters. Damien's hand found Sarah's under the table, his fingers intertwining with hers. The touch sent electricity racing up her arm, and from the sharp intake of breath beside her. He felt it too. Sarah knew she should pull away. Knew that holding hands under the table while his family watched with hawk eyes was a terrible idea. She didn't let go. Dinner was served, and the conversation shifted to safer topics. Business, politics, local gossip. Sarah navigated it all with practiced grace, aware that every word she spoke was being analyzed and judged. She was also aware of Damien's thumb tracing slow circles on the back of her hand. The touch was subtle, hidden by the tablecloth, but it was driving her to distraction. So Sarah, one of the uncles said, clearly trying to be friendlier than Sujin and Jiwoo, Damien mentioned you have business experience. What sector? Various sectors. I prefer to diversify my portfolio. Sarah took a sip of wine. Real estate, technology, manufacturing. Whatever shows promise. That's quite ambitious, he replied. Must require significant capital. It does. Family money? Jiwoo asked, her tone suggesting that would somehow make it less legitimate. Self-made, Sarah corrected. I started with nothing and built from there. That got everyone's attention. Even Sujin looked slightly impressed, though she tried to hide it. How did you manage that? Another cousin asked, genuine curiosity in his voice. Hard work. Smart decisions. Taking risks when everyone else was too afraid. Sarah's eyes flicked to Damien, seeing potential in things that others overlooked. The double meaning wasn't lost on him. His hand tightened around hers. Potential can be dangerous, Sujin warned. Sometimes what looks promising is actually a trap. And sometimes, Sarah countered smoothly, what looks dangerous is actually exactly what you need. The tension at the table ratcheted up another notch. Sarah could feel the family's judgment, their suspicion, their outright hostility from some corners. But she could also feel Minacio's approval, a few cousins' curiosity, and most importantly, Damien's presence beside her, solid, warm, protective. I need some air, Sarah said suddenly, releasing Damien's hand and standing. If you'll excuse me. She walked toward the French doors leading to the garden before anyone could protest. The cool night air was a relief after the stifling atmosphere inside. Sarah stood on the terrace, looking out at the manicured gardens lit by subtle landscaping lights. Her hands gripped the stone railing, knuckles white. What was she doing? This was insane. She'd known this man for a week, had spoken to him for maybe a total of 3 hours. And yet here she was, at his family dinner, holding his hand under the table like a teenager, defending herself against accusations she had no obligation to answer. They're protective. Sarah didn't turn around. She'd felt Damien follow her out. They're hostile, she corrected. That too. He came to stand beside her, close enough that their arms almost touched.
I'm sorry.
I knew they'd be difficult, but I didn't expect them to be quite that aggressive. Your mother hates me. Your sister thinks I'm a gold digger. The rest of them are just confused about why you brought a black woman to family dinner. Sarah finally looked at him. What are we doing, Damien? I don't know, he admitted. But I can't stop thinking about you. Haven't been able to since I woke up in that hospital and saw you sitting there like you'd been watching over me the whole time. I had been. Why? Sarah was quiet for a long moment. I don't know. I should have left. Should have gone to work. But something made me stay. The same something that's currently making my heart race just from standing next to you? Probably. Damien turned to face her fully, his hand reaching up to cup her cheek. The touch was gentle, questioning. Sarah's breath caught, but she didn't pull away. Sarah, he said softly, I know this is fast. I know it's crazy. I know my family is a nightmare and my life is complicated, and you probably think I'm insane. I know you're in trouble, Sarah interrupted. Damien's hand froze.
What?
Your company.
Park Industries.
You're drowning in debt. That's why you couldn't sleep for 7 days. That's why you collapsed. Sarah watched his expression shift from surprise to guarded caution. I'm an investor, Damien. I know how to read balance sheets, and I know when a company is about to go under. He stepped back, his hand dropping from her face. You investigated me. Of course I did. Did you think I wouldn't? And you came here anyway? Knowing what you know. Sarah met his eyes steadily. I came because you asked me to, and because despite my better judgment, I wanted to see you again. Damien stared at her for a long moment, emotions warring across his face. Then, unexpectedly, he laughed. You're either the bravest or most foolish woman I've ever met. Why not both? Fair point. He moved closer again, this time with purpose. Should I be worried that you know about the company? That depends. Are you planning to ask me for money? God, no. He looked almost offended. I'd never.
Good.
Because I don't invest in people. I invest in potential. And do I have potential? The question was light, but there was something vulnerable underneath it. Sarah's pulse quickened. They were standing so close now, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body. Close enough to see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes. I think, she said carefully, that you're more than what people see on the surface. I think you're drowning under pressure that would have broken most people. And I think... What? Damien's voice had gone low, husky. He was leaning closer, his eyes dropping to her lips. I think you're dangerous for me, Sarah whispered, but she didn't move away. The feeling is mutual. The air between them felt charged, electric. Damien's hand came up to her waist, tentative, asking permission. Sarah's breath hitched, her own hand lifting to his chest. She could feel his heart pounding beneath her palm, as fast as her own. Sarah, he murmured, his face inches from hers now. Tell me to stop. I can't. His other hand cupped her face, thumb tracing her cheekbone. Sarah's eyes fluttered closed as he leaned in, their lips a breath apart. How touching. They sprang apart like guilty teenagers. Eunice stood in the garden doorway, backlit by the dining room lights, her silhouette sharp and accusatory. She was dressed in a white dress that probably cost a fortune, her makeup flawless, her hair perfect. Una, Damien said, his voice tight. What are you doing here? Your mother invited me. Eunice stepped onto the terrace, her heels clicking against the stone. She said there was someone important coming tonight. Some big investor.
She thought I should be here.
Thought maybe you'd come to your senses. Sarah's stomach dropped. She glanced back toward the dining room where she could see Sujin watching through the window, a small satisfied smile on her face. You need to leave, Damien said firmly.
Why?
So you can continue your little romantic moment with her. Una's voice dripped venom as she gestured toward Sarah. 1 week, Damien. It's been 1 week since you dumped me in a hospital room, and you're already all over someone else. That's not. Did you sleep with her? Una's question was sharp, cutting. Is that what this is? Did she offer you something I didn't? Una, stop.
No.
I deserve answers. Una's composure was cracking, tears beginning to stream down her face. I loved you. I stood by you for 2 years. And you throw it all away for some woman who just happened to be in the right place at the right time? She saved my life, Damien said, his voice hard. So what? I'm supposed to just accept that you fell for her because she gave you CPR? That you destroyed our relationship because she played hero for 5 minutes? Sarah had heard enough. I didn't give him CPR. His heart never stopped. And I'm not interested in standing here while you rewrite history to make yourself the victim. Yuna's tear-streaked face whipped toward her. You shut up.
You don't get to talk to me.
You don't get to stand there and act superior when you're nothing but a homewrecker. We weren't home when I met him, Sarah said calmly. We were in a lobby where his girlfriend was too terrified to help him, where she stood frozen while he died. That's not a home. That's a facade. How dare you, Yuna? Damien's voice cut through the rising hysteria. Sarah's right. What we had, it wasn't real. Maybe it never was. And I'm sorry that I didn't see it sooner. I'm sorry I wasted your time. But you need to leave.
Now. Fin.
Yuna's voice went shrill. But don't come crying to me when she breaks your heart. When she uses you and leaves you, and you realize that I was the one who actually cared. She spun on her heel and stormed back into the house. Through the windows, Sarah watched her say something sharp to Sujin before stalking toward the front door. A moment later, they heard it slam. Damien exhaled slowly, running a hand through his hair. I'm so sorry. I had no idea my mother would. She wanted me to see that, Sarah said quietly. She wanted me to feel uncomfortable, unwelcome. She succeeded. Damien's jaw tightened. I'll talk to her. This is unacceptable. Don't. Sarah placed a hand on his arm. It won't change anything. She'll just resent me more. I don't care if she resents you. You're my guest, and she had no right. Damien. Sarah's voice was gentle but firm. Pick your battles. We should go back inside. You said there was an important investor coming tonight? Damien checked his watch and cursed softly. In about 20 minutes. The whole reason for this dinner. Someone bought up a massive amount of Park Industries stock over the past week. Anonymous purchases through multiple firms. Whoever they are, they now own the majority of my company. Sarah's heart skipped a beat, but she kept her expression neutral. That must be concerning. Terrifying, actually. Damien looked out at the garden, his profile sharp in the moonlight, but also hopeful. Whoever this investor is, they're brilliant. They didn't just buy stock. They restructured our debt, renegotiated with creditors, made strategic moves that stabilized everything. It's like they knew exactly what we needed. Maybe they did. My CFO thinks it's a corporate raider. Someone who'll strip the company for parts. Damien turned back to her, vulnerability clear in his eyes. But I'm hoping it's someone who sees what I see. The potential. The possibility. Sarah's throat felt tight. What if it's someone you already know? What? Before she could answer, Minesio appeared in the doorway.
Damien.
Sarah, come quickly. The investor has arrived early. Damien offered Sarah his arm, and they walked back into the dining room together. Sarah's heart was pounding so hard, she was sure everyone could hear it. The family had rearranged themselves, leaving the head of the table open. Extra chairs had been brought in. Everyone looked nervous, eager, desperate. Where are they? Sujin asked, her voice tight with forced pleasantness. In the foyer, Minesio replied, being greeted by the staff. Damien's hand found Sarah's again, squeezing gently.
He was nervous too, she realized.
His entire future hung in the balance of this meeting. Sarah squeezed back, then gently extracted her hand from his. Sarah? He looked confused. I need to tell you something, she said quietly, so only he could hear.
Now.
Yes, now. Before. Mr. Park. A butler appeared in the doorway. Your guest has arrived. The room fell silent. Everyone turned toward the entrance. Sarah took a deep breath, her decision made. She stepped forward, away from Damien, and walked toward the head of the table. Sarah? Damien's voice was confused. What are you? The butler's voice rang out formally. May I present the majority shareholder of Park Industries and tonight's guest of honor? Sarah reached the head of the table and turned to face the room. Ms. Sarah Matthews. The silence that followed was absolute. Damien's face went blank with shock. Sujin's mouth actually fell open. Jiwoo made a small choking sound. Even Mineso looked surprised, though there was something like delight in her eyes. Sarah stood at the head of the table, her posture straight, her expression calm and professional. This was her element. This was who she really was. Not just the woman who'd saved Damien's life. Not just the mysterious guest at a family dinner. The woman who owned 72% of everything his family had spent generations building. "Good evening," Sarah said, her voice carrying the authority of someone used to boardrooms and billion-dollar deals. "I believe we have some business to discuss." Part 4, 1,000 words. No one moved. No one spoke. The entire Park family sat frozen like statues, trying to process what they'd just heard. Damien stared at Sarah like he'd never seen her before. "You're the investor?" "I am." "You bought my company." 72% of it, yes." "When?" His voice was barely above a whisper. "The day after I saved your life." Sarah met his gaze steadily. "I researched you that night. Found out about the debt, the creditors, the mess you were drowning in. And I decided to do something about it." Sujin finally found her voice, shrill with disbelief. "This is impossible. You're nobody. You can't possibly have the resources to—" "I assure you, Mrs. Park, I very much have the resources." Sarah's tone was professional, almost bored. "My investment portfolio is worth approximately $300 million. The $120 million I invested in Park Industries barely made a dent." The number hung in the air like a bomb. Jiwoo started laughing, a slightly hysterical sound. "This is insane. This is absolutely insane. You're telling me that the woman we've been insulting all night is actually your boss," Sarah finished calmly. "Yes." "Oh my God." Jiwoo's face had gone pale. "Oh my God, I called you a gold digger." "You did. And Mother said you didn't belong here." "She did." Sujin looked like she might faint. Her carefully maintained composure had shattered completely. But you can't, this isn't legal? Ethical? Both, I assure you." Sarah pulled out the chair at the head of the table and sat down with the easy confidence of someone who owned the room. "I have all the documentation if you'd like to review it. Purchase agreements, transfer papers, everything properly filed and notarized." Minicio started laughing, a delighted sound that grew louder with each second. "Oh, this is wonderful. This is absolutely wonderful. You've been playing us this entire time." "Not playing exactly." Sarah's expression softened slightly when she looked at the old woman. "I genuinely came tonight because Damien invited me. The business just happened to align." "Happened to align," Damien repeated slowly. He was still standing where she'd left him, looking like his entire world had shifted beneath his feet. "Sarah, you saved my company. I invested in it. There's a difference."
No.
He moved closer, his eyes never leaving her face. "You saved it. My CFO told me this morning that whoever did this didn't just buy stock. They restructured our entire debt load. Renegotiated with creditors. Made moves that will save us millions. You did all that. I told you. I'm an investor. A good one." "You're incredible," he breathed. The way he said it, the look in his eyes, it was too much. Sarah felt heat creep up her neck. "I'm practical," she corrected. "I saw an opportunity. An opportunity, or—" Damien's voice dropped lower. "Something else?" The implication was clear. Had she done this for business? Or for him? Sarah didn't answer. Couldn't answer. Not with his entire family watching. Sujin cleared her throat, desperately trying to regain some composure.
"Well,
this is unexpected. But I'm sure we can all, that is to say, Ms. Matthews, we appreciate your investment, and I apologize if anything said tonight was
offensive?
Racist? Classist?" Sarah raised an eyebrow. "I believe different culture was mentioned. And something about being so different here." Sujin's face flushed dark red. "However," Sarah continued, her voice softening slightly, "I understand protective instincts. You saw a stranger getting close to your son, and you reacted. I can't entirely fault you for that. Well, it's my turn now. I came expecting loyalty, respect, perhaps even gratitude. Instead, I found a family that despises a black woman like me.
So be it.
From this moment on, I will repay every insult, one by one. Dear listener, thank you for listening to this episode. If you enjoyed the story, please drop a comment in the comment section and share what you think Sarah should do next. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel.